Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2017 and a new experiment where we take a look at what would happen if the top 5 leagues in Europe were all given a permanent transfer ban. So at no point in time can any of these clubs sign any new players. They can only sell the ones that they have at the moment, which means that every single club will be reliant on their youth intakes and their academies to develop their teams in the long term. Now, I've seen other experiments like this where people have gotten rid of all of the players in the club. I'm not going to do that. I want to see a transition from the current team to the future team. And if we look at the squads of the teams, you can see that in Arsenal's case, they've still got all their players here. I mean, they've got a lot of players at £50 million in there. And they've got a nice age balance as well to their team. You know, some of them are over 30, the likes of Santi Cazorla, Laurent Koscielny, Monreal, Walcott's now 27, and Sanchez and Ozil both 27 as well. But they should be able to hang on to all those players because nobody else can actually come in and buy them except for maybe the Chinese clubs. So they should be able to hang on to their players for quite a long time. And what we're going to do in this experiment, given that all of the top 5 leagues are done, I think for this one we're going to go forward about maybe just for 1 year so we can have an in-depth look at all of the transfer business across the top 5 leagues. And it isn't just the top 5 leagues. By the way, those leagues are England, Spain, Italy, France and Germany. I've also put a cap or an embargo on the 3 big Portuguese teams, Benfica, Sporting Lisbon and Porto, because this game has a mechanic that heavily benefits those teams, especially in terms of being able to buy regions from South America and giving them work permits very easily. So this experiment is about changing up the dynamic of the European leagues and hopefully giving some of the smaller nations a chance and some of the smaller clubs in each of those countries a chance to build up their teams, rise up the rankings, and in 10-15 years time be in a position to really start to dominate Europe. So I think the progression of this experiment is we'll do 1 year today. Next episode we might do 2 because more activity, certainly in the transfer market, will be happening in those first 3 years, and then we'll go 2 more years. That'll take us to 5 years over the next 3 episodes. And then if you guys are enjoying the experiment and I see lots of likes on the video, I'll keep it going. If you guys aren't interested, that's fine, just let me know. And if you've got ideas for other experiments as well, do let me know in the comments. I think this was one that was suggested a few times, so I was quite eager to try it, and I hope you guys are looking forward to it. So let's go forward in time now and take a look at the first season in each of the top 5 leagues. Well, we are in the future now, and you can see in the Premier League the title was won by Manchester City, 4 points clear of United and Chelsea. Not too many surprises there. The league table rather, is always going to look as you might expect it to. I mean, West Ham down the bottom, Everton in the bottom half, maybe a little bit surprising. No surprising that Hull, Sunderland and Swansea all got relegated. But I suppose the big screen we want to take a look at is the transfer screen. And as you can see from the transfers, there were no incoming signings for any of the big team or any of the teams in the Premier League. The biggest transfer, Antonio Valencia, leaving Manchester United for Jiangsu in China. Wayne Rooney went to Los Angeles Galaxy for £5.5 million. And then David Meyler, number 3, going to Aston Villa. Amrabat Debussy also leaving Pennington, going. Yaya Toure went to LA Galaxy, Caballero went to Seattle. So you can see these players are moving on to America now. Newcastle popping in there. I have to admit, as a Newcastle fan, I hope we do really well out of this experiment because we will come back as a big club in the Premier League and not be hit with a transfer ban. So we should be able to dominate both the league and Europe. If there's one team in this experiment that you can say will definitely be doing very well, Newcastle are that team. I'm expecting Champions League glory as this goes forward. But you can see the Scottish leagues are going to do quite well as well. Celtic picking up a player here, picking up 2 players. They've even signed Lewis Cook on loan, which is going to do wonders for them if they can sign him permanently. Quite a few players going out on loan, but virtually no transfer money is being spent in the Premier League or from the Premier League whatsoever. So these clubs are going to get so cash rich, which will enable them to invest in their stadium and their facilities, but they just cannot buy players. Now in the Spanish League, you can see that Atletico Madrid actually won the title, 7 points clear of Real Madrid. Barca way back, 12 points behind the eventual champions. Villarreal finishing in the top 4 as well. But again, no surprises to the league table. It's more just out of curiosity that we show this. Valencia finishing down in 8th is a bit disappointing. The transfer screen is the main screen for this. And as you can see, again, no money moving around whatsoever. Sevilla selling a player to Olympiacos, Shakhtar picking up a player as well, Almeria picking up a player on the cheap from Barcelona, and a few loan transfers going on as well, but nothing else really occurring whatsoever. There might have been a few free transfers, but they aren't showing up on here. So the Spanish League less affected by an exodus than the Premier League was, but you can expect this to get bigger as time goes forward. And just it's going to be so interesting watching these teams have their transfers get restricted. Now in Serie A, Juventus were the champions, 13 points clear. Again, no surprises there. Inter, Roma and Napoli all finishing in the top 4, although only the top 3 get Champions League qualification. Empoli, Pescara and Crotone all relegated. It will be interesting as well to see how the relegated teams do and how far they might drop down. On the transfer side of things, you can see that the Chinese and the Middle East actually sign a lot of players from the Italian league. It's something I noticed when I was at Napoli in my European Journeyman series. And you can see Gary Medel moving to Guangzhou and Kalinic moving to Al Ittihad. Both for over £10 million, so some extra money there for Inter and Fiorentina. A few minor transfers. Celtic again picking up another player. I think they are really going to do well in this experiment. Barry and Trapani signing players. They will obviously be coming up to the Serie A division in the next year or two, and they will start to do very well as well. In the Bundesliga, Dortmund were the eventual champions, finishing 15 points clear of Bayern Munich. Leverkusen up there as well. Hamburg and RB Leipzig finishing in 5th place. Wolfsburg getting relegated alongside Augsburg as well. I think Ingolstadt stayed up on the playoff, but those two teams going down, Wolfsburg going to really struggle. I think Augsburg will as well. On the transfer side of things, you can see a few players did actually leave. Papadopoulos moving to Jiangsu for £37 million. A huge bounty there for Dortmund that they can't spend. Leverkusen letting a couple of players go. If you let a lot of players go early on, you are really going to struggle. Dortmund had Park Ju-ho leave as well, or Park Ju-ho. Bayern losing Rafinha to Hangzhou Jingfu. But quite a few transfers leaving the German league, which is a bit surprising, especially compared to some of the other leagues that we've taken a look at. And finally, in Ligue, you can see that PSG did finish top, 6 points clear of Monaco. Lyon finishing in 3rd place. Bastia, Lorient and Cannes all getting relegated. PSG and Monaco are going to really suffer from this transfer ban because they cannot sign the players they normally would. Virtually no exits for any of the teams. I think Monaco are going to do very well in this series because they do have a brilliant contingent of young wonder kids in their side, and they could really dominate. Maybe not in the first 5 years, but certainly 5 years after that, as bigger teams lose their players through retirement and just through them getting older. You can really see Monaco stepping up a level and doing well in Europe. Now, because we've rattled through that quite quickly, I think actually instead of going just 1 year ahead, we'll go forward 2 years in each league because not a lot is going to change early on. So in the Premier League, we already know that Manchester City were the first champions. Chelsea won the league in the second year, 1 point clear of Arsenal. Liverpool and Spurs both in the Champions League place as well. City and United dropping down. I think United could really struggle because they do have a quite old squad. You can see Leeds, Middlesbrough and Palace all went down. Newcastle finishing up in 11th place. That's what I want to see. They're going to be climbing that table quite quickly, I think. And if we look at the transfers for that season, then you can see that Guangzhou and Quanjin both coming in with big transfers, taking Dejan Lovren for nearly £40 million. Arnautovic has been taken from Stoke, but Newcastle signing Domenico Berardi. That is a big move for Newcastle, and they are going to do very well. Wanyama moving to China as well. Bentaleb leaving Spurs. That's a dangerous one for a young player. Jordan Rhodes being taken away from Middlesbrough. Newcastle signing Duarte, who's a good player from Espanyol, also putting in a bid for Mati Fernandez down there at the bottom for £1.2 million. Middlesbrough losing Brad Guzan to Atlanta United for £6.25 million. Otherwise, not too many surprising transfers in here. Leeds picking up Carl Bartley and Kalas leaving for Besiktas. Turkish League might do well out of this as well. Newcastle letting a couple of players go as well. But Newcastle are going to be so active, especially when they do start to spend that Premier League money. They're going to do quite well. And if we take a look at the season after the 18-19 season, you can see that Arsenal were the champions this time, beating Manchester United to it. Chelsea and Liverpool in the top four. Manchester City down in 8th place, really struggling there. Newcastle finishing up in 6th place. Sunderland getting relegated alongside QPR and Brighton. And if we take a look at the transfers for that season, you can see once again Newcastle dominating up here alongside Wolves, actually, who have spent quite a lot of money. Ben Osborne, the biggest transfer, going to Brighton from Nottingham Forest. Harry Maguire going to Wolves for 9.5 million. Andre Carrillo signed from Benfica for Newcastle, also picking up Ivor Fossum, a very good player. Scott Dan, Sakai coming in as well. Medford Smith, another one. Wolves, though, spending a lot of money here. Paul Dummett from Newcastle. Andy Carroll's left West Ham for QPR. QPR could do quite well, actually, if they get their money together properly. CM Dion going to Turkey. No other major transfers in the Premier League. So most teams still hanging on to their players. I mean, Jordan Pickford's gone to Wolves, actually. I missed that one, but that's a huge transfer for Wolves. That'll set them up for the future quite well. But you can see Newcastle already up in 6th place, starting to do well. Wolves just about avoiding relegation, but it looks like they're ready to step on and do well in this league. So you can see a slight shift already with City dropping down to 8th and Newcastle up to 6th. There are going to be changes in this league as we go forward. Now in Spain, Atletico Madrid won the first league title, but Real Madrid came back to win the second, 9 points clear of Atletico. Bilbao finishing up in 4th, Gijon, Granada and Tenerife all getting relegated. The year after that, Atletico Madrid again winning the title the second time in 3 years, beating their rivals Madrid to the top. Bilbao overtaking Barcelona, that's an interesting one. Barcelona slipping down to 4th, Valencia still way down there in the table. Elche, Vallecano and Pamplona all getting relegated. If we look at the transfer screen, in this division, drop back 1 year to the 17-18 season. You can see Newcastle picking up Duarte in there, one of the biggest transfers, but Konoplyanka leaving Sevilla for nearly £10 million, but no real exits from Barcelona or Real Madrid. They're still hanging on to their big players, so again another league where that's not happening. The year after that, Wolves actually had the biggest transfer from the Spanish league. Levante, though, looking like the Spanish team who are spending the cash at the moment. Not an awful lot of money, but they have picked up Jordan Ayew from Swansea. But again, Real Madrid, Lineheart, not a big player. Barcelona, Douglas, not a big player. They are hanging on to those big players, and it looks like they will stay there until retirement based on this. Now in Serie A, Juventus are expected to dominate, and they did win the league the second season as well, finishing well clear of Roma and AC Milan. Napoli and Inter still up there as well, no major shifts in the league there. And the following year, once more, Juventus dominating the league ahead of Inter, Lazio up to 3rd place, Napoli and Milan finishing in the European places, but Fiorentina and Roma both dropping down. I can see the Italian league being incredibly competitive going forward, and if we look at the transfers for this league, you can see that in the first or second season, Perisic leaving Inter for £43 million to China. Allen leaving Napoli for £40 million. They also lost Gulam. So you can see Napoli starting to possibly struggle. Roma, though, signing players. How has that happened? Roma have a transfer ban lifted. They didn't sign any players in the first 2 years. So something has gone on in Roma to allow them to sign players. I have no idea what's happened there. It's only that season that they've signed players. They didn't sign any the year after. But for some reason, they've been allowed to sign players. Now, I double-checked every single team, and I know that they shouldn't be doing that. So I do not know what has happened at that club there. Let me see if I can figure out what has gone on by looking at their history. Now in Serie A, Juventus are expected to dominate, and they did win the league the second season as well, finishing well clear of Roma and AC Milan. Napoli and Inter still up there as well, no major shifts in the league there. And the following year, once more, Juventus dominating the league ahead of Inter, Lazio up to 3rd place, Napoli and Milan finishing in the European places, but Fiorentina and Roma both dropping down. I can see the Italian league being incredibly competitive going forward, and if we look at the transfers for this league, you can see that in the first or second season, Perisic leaving Inter for £43 million to China. Allen leaving Napoli for £40 million. They also lost Gulam. So you can see Napoli starting to possibly struggle. Roma, though, signing players. How has that happened? Roma have a transfer ban lifted. They didn't sign any players in the first 2 years. So something has gone on in Roma to allow them to sign players. I have no idea what's happened there. It's only that season that they've signed players. They didn't sign any the year after. But for some reason, they've been allowed to sign players. Now, I double-checked every single team, and I know that they shouldn't be doing that, so I do not know what has happened at that club there. Let me see if I can figure out what has gone on by looking at their history. Yep, there is nothing in their history to suggest why they've been able to sign players. They've still got the transfer ban till 2060. So I have no idea how they've been able to get away with that. Well, maybe they had an appeal that succeeded temporarily. I don't understand it, but somehow Inter have spent £10.25 million, unless the only thing I can think is maybe they're part-owned players and they were able to bring them in by paying a fee. That's the only situation I can think of, because Juventus have signed a player as well. So maybe someone in the comments can let me know what has gone on in Italy to allow Italian teams to actually sign players. That is something that I do not understand, except maybe for the part ownership rules that they have in Italy. Now, the year after, they did also Inter spending £17.25 million on a player, Fiorentina spending £7 million on a player, but the rest were all exits, so it looks like it is a temporary thing. It's not something that's going to continue in a long time. Roma losing 3 players, Dodo leaving as well, Jordan Lukaku leaving Lazio, so quite a few transfers occurring. This looks like the league to really watch in Italy, because there could be some fascinating developments. Now, in France, PSG did win the first league title. They then won the second, 2 points clear of Monaco, but Lyon closing that gap just 3 points off the top. And the year after that, Monaco did win the league title. Again, Lyon up there in the top 3, doing very, very well. On the transfers side of things, we can see that Olympique Marseille were able to sign a player from, or it was a pre-agreed transfer, wasn't it? Maybe that's why they were able to sign Thauvin, because Lille have also picked up Sliti. Celtic, though, picking up Lassina Traoré from Monaco, a good transfer for Celtic there. A few clubs from Turkey taking players, but it's mostly the lower league French clubs taking them from the higher league teams. The year after that, no major transfers at all, but again at Turkey, some Brazilian teams in there as well, and then mostly French lower division teams taking players out of the French league. In the German First Division, obviously Dortmund won the league the first season, but Bayern came roaring back to win it the second season. Dortmund dropping down from champions to 4th, which is a bit of a surprise. And then the year after that, again, Bayern win the league. Just 1 point in it, though, and Leverkusen just 2 points off the top. So things getting a bit tighter in that league at the moment. If we look at the transfers for that first season, you can see that Campbell left for China for £23 million. Nicolas Sul moving to Bayern for 17.24. Schalke signing a couple of players as well from Spurs and Sevilla. Just going to check if they've got their transfer ban. They do have a transfer ban, so there's something going on that is allowing these transfers to go through. It must be pre-agreed transfers, loan signings, various things like that. But otherwise, mostly just other German teams picking up players from the lower division. The year after that, Newcastle had the biggest transfer. Stuttgart signing 3 players. Otherwise, Dynamo Moscow in there, but mostly players leaving. No major transfers, so all the big players still at their original clubs. So not a lot of surprises yet in the transfers. Now, if we look at the Europa League, we're just going to run through this quite quickly. You can see that in the first season, the 16-17 season, Manchester United managed to beat Southampton to go through. Bilbao, Schalke and Inter also going in. In the semis, it was United and Inter that got through, and the final was won by Manchester United. So the status quo mostly continuing there. The following year, it was Lyon, Liverpool, Sevilla and Spurs. Again, mostly the big teams. Liverpool and Sevilla going through a repeat of the final from a couple of years ago, and Liverpool did actually win the cup this time. And then in the final season, you can see that Leipzig got in there. Monaco, Sporting, Spurs, again, big clubs in and around the right position. Spurs and Sporting made the final, and it was won by Tottenham Hotspur 1-0 in the final, giving them the Europa League and qualification for the Champions League in the process. In the Champions League quarterfinals, you can see Barcelona, PSG, Juventus and Bayern all went through. No surprise in there. Lyon making the quarterfinals is quite impressive. And then Barca and Juve in the final, which was won by Barcelona. Juventus not catching a break in European Cup finals. The following year, 3 English teams and Barcelona all making the semis. No big surprises in the quarterfinals though. Barca and Chelsea, the teams to go through to the final, and it was won by Barcelona quite convincingly. And then the following year, Leverkusen making the semi-finals. Bit of a surprise there. Bayern, Chelsea and Barcelona, the other teams to go through. In the semis, Bayern and Barca made the final, which was won by Bayern Munich on penalties. So, bit of variation in the winners of the Champions League, but mostly things continuing at a status quo sort of level in the first 3 years. No big shocks in the transfers, no big shocks in the leagues, except maybe Manchester City finishing 8th. But in the first part of this experiment, we're just looking at the preliminary actions, and there's not been an awful lot happen yet because clubs aren't letting their players go. They're all hanging on to them, and we've got to wait for them to retire, essentially, before we can see some of the young players coming through. So I think in the next part of this experiment, I'll probably go 4 years ahead. I know we did 3 years today. We'll go 4 years ahead next time. Take a look at the different transfers and also see how the leagues have been mixed up in that time. But yeah, not a lot happened in this first bit. Maybe let me know in the comments what you think about what kind of time jumps we should be taking here and how much detail you want to go into, what different screens you want to want me to have a look at, and if there's particular detail you want put onto the academies. I mean, there's a lot of things I could show in this experiment that are quite interesting, but you're going to have to let me know in the comments. Drop a like on the video if you're intrigued by this experiment, and also it helps me know if you are interested in this and want me to do another part to it, and maybe how long into the future you want me to go. At the minute, the transfer ban is set up to 2060, so there's another 39 years that it can run for before it comes to an end and the big clubs can maybe start spending money on players again, and that could be a very interesting experiment in and of itself. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Drop a like on the video, as I said, and subscribe if you want to see the next part of this experiment. But until next time, see ya.